Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. So, today's show is the start of. I was thinking of how I could, kind of categorize these next videos coming your way. The and kind of the format. Obviously, I'm going to just do them as my kind of regular reviews, but I was thinking about how to, more or less go about labeling some of these movies. This is this whole big ocean of new reviews that's coming your way are all of the movies that I bought on Saturday during the little hurricane that we had here in Maine. I mentioned it before. I went to Opera House Video on Saturday. The the only video shop that I know of, and it's also a place that I really love. I have a long history and connection to it, where it's the only place that I know that you can rent movies and buy movies. So I've had a real deep connection to Opera House Video for many, many years. So I they had this massive sale on Saturday. Basically, they were selling all of their kind of extra duplicate copies of their movies that they have. They have just a surplus of movies. So they've been doing these big sales, and they started. The first one was in June of this year, and it was pretty awesome. I had a massive haul of movies that I bought, and I did a lot of reviews on pretty much all the movies that I bought. I typically, and then also on Saturday, I went to, and it was everything was pretty unplanned, which is kind of how I roll, I guess, where things are a little bit more. I'm not a really good planner when it comes to things. I used to try to always plan things when, when I had the time, but I typically don't do that anymore because I feel like whenever I make plans, a lot of the times things always shift or change, or it doesn't end up happening. So a lot of the times I do things, especially if it's like involving other friends. Typically, what I do now is I just. It sounds kind of funny, but I typically now, if I make plans, tentative plans to do something socially or whatnot with friends, I do it pretty last minute and pretty impromptu. And it seems like when I do things that way, the plan comes together. You know. So anyway, after I went to Opera House Video, I got a shit ton of movies, and it was great and it was awesome. I got there really early. I got a whole bunch of movies, and then after that, the power was out here, and it was out most of the day. It was a hurricane, so my folks had called me basically right after I got home, and they asked me about going out for Chinese food to Bangor, which is about an hour away. And I go to the Bull Moose in Bangor quite a bit. That's one of my favorite shops. Bull Moose in general is my favorite shop. Lately, I've been going to. My favorite place overall has always been Waterville, but for some reason, I've been going to the Bull Moose in Bangor more frequently. And I just find that, I don't know if maybe it's maybe it's not completely true, but I feel like overall their selection's gotten even better as far as movies go and their music selection. So I've been on this kick the last few times where I've been going there, and it's been really awesome. So when after we made some plans to go to Bangor, I had asked them about, hey, let's stop at Bull Moose. So we ended up going to Bull Moose, and I got another stack of movies, and so it was a pretty amazing day, and I've accumulated a massive pile of movies that I've been watching, and it's been really awesome. So what I was thinking of doing was how I wanted to. Typically, when I do these shows, I just usually review movies that I really love, movies that excite me, and favorite films of mine. Newer films that I've seen, a lot of older films, a lot of Blu-rays most of the time. I typically just do reviews on movies that I really love. I don't typically do negative reviews. If I see a movie, I don't typically put up, negative videos about or negative reviews about a film. When I go to the movies, which is like really rare, which is kind of sad, I will do reviews of that experience or of that film, more or less, regardless of what I experienced. That's usually, not that it's a rule for me, but that's usually kind of the exception. But what I thought about doing, because I have so many movies and I have a lot of different styles of movies that I bought, mostly DVDs, I did get some pretty good Blu rays. I figured it could be fun to just review everything that I have, even if it's a movie I don't really like or whatnot. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to label the movies that I was not really excited by. I'm going to label them as more or less the as part of the movie haul that I of all the movies I bought. The movies that I just really love in this collection, I'm gonna just do present them as I would normally. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So, again, it's a thing where I'm trying to always change up things, bring more and more variety to this channel, and just sharing my love and passion for films. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So, yeah. So today's show is on a movie that I really, really love. I just love this movie to death. I've seen it so many times, and I just bought it on Saturday at Opera House Video. I bought it on DVD. Pretty good copy of this film. There's no special features. That's the only downside. This would be an awesome movie to buy on Blu-ray. But I just love this movie, and I watched it again the other night, and again, it's a movie that just gets better for me. Just gets better and better with time. It's like fine wine, and that is Absolute Power. And it was directed by the iconic legend in Hollywood, Clint Eastwood, starring Gene Hackman, Ed Harris. This movie is such an amazing movie. I love this movie. This is such a great thriller. I remember seeing this film in the theater at good old Colonial Theater when it came out, and I've always been a huge Clint Eastwood fan, and with Clint Eastwood being a legend in Hollywood, as an actor and also a pretty exceptional director, especially in the '90s and in the '70s, and a tremendous actor. All of the great and wonderful spaghetti westerns, all of the westerns that he did in the '70s, all of his amazing iconic work with Sergio Leone, all of the incredible Italian spaghetti westerns, and then of course all of the American westerns that he also was involved in. My favorite movie of his that he's directed and also starred in, which also stars Gene Hackman, and I did a review on this film last year, is The Unforgiven. That's probably I'm a big fan of westerns. I love westerns, and I did buy in my purchase on Saturday. I did buy a couple of westerns. I got a couple of really awesome movies with John Wayne, so very excited about that. I'm a big John Wayne fan, but I'm a huge fan of westerns. I have a few movies on this channel of westerns, but eventually I'm gonna do more and more. Just a few of them, and The Unforgiven is my favorite overall, my favorite western of all time. And as far as from a directorial stance and from an acting stance, it's my favorite movie that Clint Eastwood's ever done. And Absolute Power is a movie that I feel is a close tie with The Unforgiven. This movie was really, I feel like this movie is really underappreciated, never really talked about. I mean, Clint Eastwood has been around for just decades upon decades. It's astounding. You know, he's almost. I think he's closing in on almost. You know, you know, possibly being almost 100 years old at this point, and he's still directing movies. But um, his more recent work, not a huge fan of. But I feel like during that period of when he made The Unforgiven, which was in the '90s, and then also Absolute Power, it was. I feel like he really. It's kind of like the twilight of his career. I feel like he reached this high level, especially especially as when it comes to him being a director. He reached this point in his career where he was, I think, one of the best uh, filmmakers around. And the Absolute Power, I just think, is an example of that. I never hear it ever talked about. I never, I never hear anything. I never hear this film discussed. It came out in 1997, and if you're a fan of really great suspense movies, and it's such a classic. I feel like it's such a, even though it came out a long time ago now, 1997. It's it's just such a classic modern thriller. I mean, it's so great. When I watched this film the other night, and again, I've seen this movie many, many times. I've never seen it on Blu-ray. I I've never owned this movie before, but I've rented it a, a ton of times from Opera House Video over the years, and I think I might have seen it a couple times on cable. But it's a movie that I just feel just gets better and better with age. And when I watched it again the other night after I bought it, and I'm really excited that I actually own it now. It really reminded me of like it felt like a film that came out in the '70s. It has a very kind of slow pace to it. It's a little bit of a slow burn film, but there's a lot of great atmosphere to this movie. It's really, really suspenseful, and especially like how the film starts. It just slowly unravels, and it's centered on Clint Eastwood, who is the star of the film, but also the director. You know, again, the cast is amazing. Laura Linney, who plays his daughter in the film, Ed Harris, who plays a cop. Just such a just such an amazing cast. Gene Hackman, I think, is just incredible in this film. Um, Kim Lynn Eastwood is also in this film. Allison Eastwood, who is actually Clint Eastwood's daughter, is briefly in this film. Um, Exceptional stuff. E.G. Marshall, Dennis Haysbert, Scott Glenn, the iconic American actor Scott Glenn, he's really wonderful in this. Judy Davis, another amazing actress who's been around for years. Malona Melora Hardin is also in this film. I'm a huge Gene Hackman fan, and I kind of feel like, he retired from films as an actor, about 15, 20 years ago or so. He moved on to become, now he's a writer. He publishes books, writes books. But, during his time, again, I feel like Clint Eastwood in the '90s, he really reached this high level, just an exceptional level as an actor. Probably my favorite roles of his are like movies like the French Connection, amazing, directed by the late great William Friedkin. So many great movies. Poseidon Adventures, another awesome movie. So many great films. Really versatile. He's even his role in Bonnie and Clyde is just incredible. And you know, famously played Lex Luthor, and you know he's amazing in that film also. Although, or I should say, those films. Just an incredible diversity to his career also, but just you know his strength being a really great melodramatic actor. But he's always been one of my favorites. It was sad to kind of see him step away, but I think you know he left such a great he's still around and he's still alive, and but he left such a great film legacy. So, but again, this movie is so damn good. It's such a great thriller, great characters, and like I said, it feels like a '70s movie when I watch this movie. It has, the '70s is my favorite decade. It just has this nice kind of slow burn pace that is kind of a classic trait of the '70s. It's got really great characters. Like automatically, you're given. I feel like the writing is so great for this film. You're given just enough backstory with all the characters on the screen that you have that you really care about what you're seeing and you care about those characters. There's a really cool story between the father and daughter, played by Clint Eastwood and Laura Linney. They play father and daughter in this movie. There's a great chemistry with their characters that I think is really awesome and very strong. And I think is one of the reasons that this movie is really good. And there's also a really interesting kind of love interest in this movie that is subtle, but it just adds so much kind of charisma to the movie between Ed Harris and Laura Linney. And it's very subtle, but it's just really cool, and it just really elevates the movie by giving it a few different textures. But at its core, it's just such a badass thriller. Really great ending. It's a pretty dark movie too, especially the score for this movie is exceptional. Really, really good. I have a really good surround sound system, or man cave, if you will, here at home at Film Fanatic headquarters. And watching this movie on DVD with the system, it's pretty exceptional, especially with the music. Just an amazing score. The Especially the opening sequence to this movie, just pretty extraordinary, and it's kind of like you're just kind of thrust into this kind of nail biting suspense like right away, and you're just, wow, where is this going to go? What does this mean? And it takes you on this really interesting journey that you don't really foresee coming, and that's one of the great things about it. And it, like, again, like I said, it's not really you know a fast paced movie, I guess you want to call it, if you want to call it that. But it has a slow burn, and it's so wonderful with giving you just enough, and then before you know it, you're completely invested and you care about all of the characters. It would be awesome to get this eventually on Blu-ray, just because it's such a great movie. But I think it's definitely outside of The Unforgiven, which is my favorite movie that Eastwood ever directed and starred in. I feel like this is the other movie that is right up there. So many great movies that, especially earlier in his career, that he directed and starred in. But this movie is just an exception. Just Awesome movie. And I again, I never really hear this movie ever talked about. I'm not sure why. So I was really excited when I bought this. Again, I've never had a copy of this. I've never owned it, but I've seen it a shit ton of times, and it was great. It was awesome watching it again. I enjoyed it even more, and it's one of those movies that you it, there are certain movies that you can watch, and I've had that experience, lots of times of where certain movies, for various reasons, I think it might be because of how the narrative of the story is, maybe the pacing, but there are certain movies that I really love where each time you watch it, you kind of get something a little bit different. You kind of get a little bit more of to a degree, like a deeper experience around it. You kind of get lost in it a little bit more each time. And certain films that have that kind of pace or pacing, you might discover something new about it each time. And I feel like Absolute Power has that way about it. It does, every time I watch it, it gets better. Exceptional movie. And, I just think real testimony to just high level craftsmanship when it comes to the magic of directing a film. Really, really exceptional. The whole premise of the story is really interesting too, because it's basically centered on Clint Eastwood, who plays a jewel thief, and he gets kind of pulled into this pretty dark conspiracy where he witnesses a murder that is tied to the White House and the President of the United States. And Gene Hackman plays the president, and it's really great. It's just really suspenseful. It doesn't have the typical cliched thing about it. It could easily go in that direction, but it defies a little bit of what your expectations are going to be. And again, it has a very, it feels like a movie that came out from out of the 70s, and it has this very slow burn way about it, and all of those attributes I feel make this movie so damn good and so suspenseful. I can't recommend this movie enough. So yeah, it's hard to believe that this came out in 1997, but this movie, like fine wine, just gets better and better. Classic movie, one of my favorite movies of Clint Eastwood, uh, without a doubt. So I look forward to, eventually. I'm pretty happy with this copy. It's pretty good quality. It doesn't have any special features, but this would be pretty awesome to eventually get on Blu-ray. I'm sure there is a Blu-ray version of this movie somewhere, but I'm pretty damn happy with this movie. And this was the first movie that I started to watch, that I watched in my purchases from Opera House Video. So pretty awesome way to kick this whole thing off. So Absolute Power, directed by Clint Eastwood, from 1997. One of the best thrillers you'll ever see. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.